At dawn, the factory always felt colder than anywhere else in Nairobi. The sour smell of metal mingled with something sweet from the bakery across the road, and in those blue-grey hours, I sometimes forgot why I was still there. That morning, the supervisor's hands were hard on my shoulder, steering me away from the hum of machines. The rest of the shift stared at the floor, some tried not to look at me at all. He told me in a flat voice that they had to let me go, restructuring. It's not personal, he said, but he didn't look at my eyes for even a second. I emptied my locker in that half-light, my uniform stiff with old sweat and detergent. Outside, matatus coughed their engines awake. My hands shook, not from the cold. I looked up at the sky just turning gold, and already I could imagine what my mother might say when I brought the news home. I pressed my phone in my pocket, swallowing hot air, willing myself not to cry. I walked home through the waking city, hands shoved into my jacket until my fingers hurt. Every step was another question: how would I tell them? What would Baba think, my brother with his good government job, his crisp shirts? I reached our iron gate and hesitated, letting my shoes scuff the dusty patch by the road. Inside, it smelled of tea and onions, Mum's morning ritual. I lingered outside the kitchen, listening to her slippers on the floor. "Salah, you're back early," she called out, voice edged with confusion. I waited, thinking maybe if I didn't answer, I could stay in that lost space a bit longer. "Inendalia age," she pressed, coming to the doorway, her robe knotted tight around her waist. I told her. The words sat between us. Factory closed, jobs gone. She nodded, tightly, lips pressed like she'd expected it. She sat, and her disappointment filled the small room, coloring every spoon and cup. When Baba finally came out for breakfast, he listened quietly, then set his newspaper down and asked what I would do now. "What I've always wanted," I said, and my voice quivered, but I meant it. "I want to cook, open my own little place." He didn't answer, and in his silence I heard every unspoken word. My uncle, living with us after he lost his leg, gave me a look I had seen 1,000 times before, one I knew would follow me everywhere. He laughed, rough and hopeless. "People dream with their eyes open and wake up with nothing," he said. "You, Salah, will learn soon enough." That was the beginning. I tried to make the kitchen my workspace. At first, everyone was patient. My mother watched as I hovered over sulfurias, busy mapping spices and notes from memories of watching her cook chapati matoke pilau. The evenings stretched into midnight as I tested recipes, recorded ingredients, burnt more onions than I could count. But houses have thin walls. The soft encouragement faded the longer I stayed jobless. My brother began leaving pamphlets about job training for security guards, sales clerks. Even my friends who once asked for my samosas stopped texting after a while. It got so I could hear their voices even when they weren't talking. One Saturday evening, my cousin brought over her boyfriend, and as the laughter rolled between bites of ugali, he asked, "So, Salah, you're the famous chef, eh? Cooking for the president next?" A round of laughter, not cruel but not kind. I washed dishes that night with an ache in my chest. Money grew tight, my mother's tolerance wore thin. She started hinting. "Maybe you take up work at Auntie's kiosk, just for now. Cooking for the neighborhood is not a business, Salah." But I was stubborn. Something in me, call it stupidity or pride, wouldn't let go. When I felt overwhelmed by shame or fear, I'd sneak out at night, crossing wet, empty streets, walking past lit-up restaurants where others made their living with what I wished was my craft. I watched, hiding by the windows, listening to the sizzle of oil, the slap of dough, the easy way cooks shouted orders, always wanting. At dawn, I'd return, shoulders hunched. I started collecting old cookbooks from the Sunday markets, pages stained and ripped. I wrote everything in my small notebook. I doubted every word but kept writing anyway. My only solace was the small radio in the kitchen, listening to chefs from far-off places talk about food like it was music. One afternoon, I found a post online seeking assistance for a new restaurant in Kilimani. They asked for a CV, samples of cooking. My hands shook as I typed out my life, leaving out all the ugly parts, focusing on flavor combinations, the little skills learned in my mother's kitchen. I took my precious last notes and recipes to town for the interview. I wore my best shirt, ironed and threadbare at the cuffs. The woman interviewing me, Nancy, was impatient. She scanned my papers, face blank. "We are looking for people with qualifications. Culinary school, maybe. You have any?" "No," I admitted, voice strangled, "but I can cook, I can show you." A silence. She tapped her pen, running a finger down my resume. Finally she shrugged. "You can try out, we'll taste. If you're good, we see." That day on a borrowed stove, I made what I knew best, my mother's pilau with cloves and cinnamon, spicy, fragrant. I cooked with everything I had left. The smell filled the room, warm and familiar, and for a moment I remembered what it was to hope. Nancy tasted, closed her eyes, then she smiled, but not with her mouth, just the tiniest light in her eyes. Okay, Salah, come tomorrow. We try it. It was the first yes I'd gotten in years. Work at the restaurant was brutal, the chefs were fast, sharp-tongued, the pace never let up. I made mistakes all the time. Burnt the bottom of a curry, let chapatis go dry, fumbled orders. For months I was the lowest, scraping dishes, chopping endless onions, being shouted at in 2 languages. But I learned, I watched, memorized. Whenever the kitchen emptied out, I practiced what I'd seen, tasting everything, reading the kitchen like a storybook. Sometimes Nancy caught me. She'd say nothing, but the corners of her mouth would twitch. The days blurred, saw feet, raw hands, smells that clung to my skin. But the small things kept me going. When another chef quietly slid me a taste of his curry, when a customer complimented the chapati, when I finally heard, not bad, from an older cook whose praise was rare. The people at home never asked. I left early, came home late, carrying the exhaustion like armor. Still, whenever there was a family gathering, my success was measured by how many shillings I brought in, not by the food stories I wanted to share. They talked about me in low voices in the hallway, and sometimes I caught single words, foolish, not real work, still struggling, but in the restaurant I built something. I got promoted to line cook, then assistant. Nancy taught me to taste with my nose, to understand ingredients as if they were personalities. I saved every extra shilling, planning for the day I could have my own place, tiny, maybe even a food cart, but mine. One night a diner from abroad ate my dish and complimented it to Nancy. The next week she summoned me to her office. I want you to design a menu item, she said. I thought I'd misheard. I couldn't move for a few seconds. You mean just me? She nodded. Bring your home here, people need to taste that. I worked for days, experimenting, tasting, crying in frustration when nothing seemed right. Finally, I'd built something, a stew with tender goat, smoky with pepper, layered with cardamom and coconut, poured over lemony rice, topped with tiny fried onions and coriander. We put it on the menu. It sold out in hours. People asked for the recipe. In the following weeks, Nancy introduced me to suppliers, managers, told everyone Salah knows flavor. For the first time, I felt not just useful but wanted. The restaurant's reviews mentioned my name. As months passed, my confidence grew, my savings slowly climbed. At night, I added to the folder on my old laptop, location ideas, price estimates, logo sketches. I started to believe. If I could survive here, I could survive anywhere. My mother, for her birthday, invited everyone, extended family, neighbors, old friends. I rarely went to these gatherings, but this time she pressed. Come, everyone will be here. You work too hard, your cousin is now an engineer, you know. That familiar edge in her voice. I went hoping to be invisible, but the moment I stepped in, I was surrounded by old faces, inquiring eyes. My cousin Paul grinned, lifting his plate of food. Hey, chef, what are you cooking for us today? Someone else laughed. My uncle, leaning on his cane, nudged me, still chasing recipes. The world belongs to people with real skills, Salah. You can't feed a family on spices and dreams. Silence fell, my hands clenched deep in my pockets. I smiled as if it didn't matter, but it burned all the way home. I left early, standing in the dark by the gate, breathing in the soft smell of wet earth after rain. I closed my eyes and promised myself I would not stop, not until I could stand before these people and show myself that I'd been right to hope. Years passed, I kept working, climbed higher, then outgrew the place that had given me everything. Nancy shook my hand as I left, hugged me, pressed a small brown envelope into my pocket. For luck, she said. When I found it later, it was a stack of shillings and a crisp handwritten note. Salah, yours is a flavor we need in Nairobi, don't stop. I rented a space in a busy section of Ngong Road. It was nothing, bare walls, a single rickety fan, no kitchen to speak of. The landlord looked unconvinced. You will sell chapatis from here? Yes, I said, not knowing if I believed it myself. The first night I painted the walls white and pale green. I scoured Gicomba for cheap tables, found an old counter, bleached everything twice. I hired Miriam, a school friend who needed the work, to help with prep. We built the kitchen with scrap and prayers. We opened without fanfare. The first few days it was mostly friends of friends, shyly trying food, some taking photos for Instagram. Then a food blogger came, her review posted the next morning, hidden treasure, real taste, soulful. The next day the place was packed, people queued in the rain, we stayed open late, exhausted but alive. A TV reporter called to schedule a story, someone from the Standard newspaper came to interview me, customers asked for signatures on napkins, wanted to take selfies. One woman wept as she tasted my mbuzi stew, saying it tasted like her grandmother's. We called the place Nyumbani, home. I was busy every moment but never too tired to taste, to greet a new face, to remember every burnt onion that had brought me here. The money finally came, slowly at first, then enough to hire staff, to buy a big oven, to pay for my mother's medicine, to help my brother when he lost his job. And still, every now and then, I thought about my uncle's laughter. The kitchen where I once was unwelcome, the gatherings where my stories stalled on my tongue. Then, out of the blue, my aunt rang. "Sala, your mother wants you to cater Mzee's 70th birthday," she said. "It's a big thing, everyone will be there. They've all seen you on TV, they want to taste it." A tightness ran through me. Could I face them again after so long? Would they remember the old jokes? But I accepted. I arrived at the family compound with my team and trays of food. Bihari, sweet coconut rice, chicken stew in bright turmeric sauce, chapati stacked high and golden. The tent overflowed with laughing relatives, the neighbors from my street, cousins I hardly recognized. At first they circled warily. My uncle loomed, his eyes assessing, cane tapping. My brother, older now, greeted me warmly as if making up for years of silence. My mother hovered by the door, anxious and proud. I set up beneath the jacaranda, shade flecked with purple petals, the food arrayed in shining pans. The whispers started as the scents drifted, clove, cardamom, pepper. As guests filled their plates, conversation hushed. A woman closed her eyes after a bite, muttering, "Hakika, it's like the coast." Children danced for second helpings. My uncle, cautious, dipped into the goat stew. He ate in silence. I watched his brow furrow, his lips pressed together around the warmth of spice. Then he sought me out. He walked slowly with his cane. For a moment he said nothing, simply stared at his empty plate and back at me. "All these years," he said quietly. Sala, you stuck with it, I was wrong." He looked around at the neighbors, the distant cousins. "This here is what it means to build something. You," his voice cracked mid-sentence. He gripped my shoulder, smiling the way few old men do, letting warmth overcome pride. I felt a loosening inside my chest I didn't know I'd been holding. My mother beamed, laughter in her eyes. Even Paul, my cousin, elbowed me. "You should have made me your taster since primary school," he joked, shoving chapati into his mouth. The party turned from tense to joyful. People called for seconds, sang old songs, children spilled food everywhere. I looked out over the lawn, sunlight rolling down the corrugated roofs, filtering through acacia branches. Inside, the ache of rejection faded, replaced by a quiet pride. All those lone walks through Nairobi, the shame, the tired hands, it all rebuilt me piece by piece. As I gathered up plates and laughter, my brother clapped me on the back. "Let me help you with the big pot, chef," he said. Later, after everyone left, I lingered in the kitchen with my mother. She placed her hands on mine, squeezed. "Sala, you did it. You made this family proud." I walked out to the gate, the same place I'd once hovered, weighed down by loss. Now the city seemed open, golden. I reached for the sky, no longer cold, no longer a stranger, just another day full of flavor waiting to be made. I had come home not as a beggar but as myself, and this time they saw me.